A 911 call on a peaceful evening. Ethan, a black teenager, is just walking home from basketball practice. Laura, a white woman, sees him and calls the police out of unfounded fear. The police stop and search Ethan as if he were a criminal. But they have no idea his father is an FBI agent. Oakwood Hills, a symbol of prosperity and tranquility, where pristine roads wind through meticulously manicured gardens, where every home exudes elegance and class. Here, life seems to drift by serenely, without a ripple. But behind that perfect facade, there are untold stories, secrets hidden behind closed doors, anxieties silently creeping into every corner. And sometimes, that tranquility is just a fragile veneer, concealing deep-seated prejudices and fears. Today, Oakwood Hills will no longer be a still picture. An event will occur, stirring the inherent peace, and exposing the shadows lurking behind the glittering exterior. A black teenager, a white woman, and an inevitable confrontation. Their story will forever change Oakwood Hills. Ethan Brooks, 16, had just left basketball practice, his shirt soaked with sweat. He decided to take a shortcut through Oakwood Hills to get home faster. With his headphones on, he walked along the smooth stone sidewalk, trying to shake off the fatigue from practice. The lively music in his ears couldn't quite drown out the growing sense of unease. As he passed the lavish houses, Ethan felt that something wasn't right. He glanced around, but everything seemed quiet. A small dog barked a few times and then fell silent. An unsettling feeling spread through him. He wondered if he was just imagining things, or if something was actually happening. He shivered, trying to dispel the anxiety by turning up the music. He told himself that he was just tired and imagining things. From the window of a two-story house, Laura Cartwright observed Ethan. She had never seen him here before. Suspicion arose, and she hurriedly called the police. She picked up the phone, her hand trembling, and dialed 911. "There's a suspicious black teenager walking through the neighborhood," she said, her voice filled with anxiety. "I've never seen him here before. He's carrying a sports bag, and he seems to be looking around." She wasn't sure why she had called the police. Perhaps it was because she had watched too much crime news. Or perhaps it was because she was used to seeing people like Ethan in other neighborhoods. Not in Oakwood Hills. She felt a vague sense of fear, a feeling that something was wrong. She recalled stories of burglaries in nearby areas, and she feared that the same could happen in Oakwood Hills. The police quickly arrived in Oakwood Hills. They stopped Ethan, demanding to see his bag. Ethan was confused and scared, not understanding why he was being stopped. "I'm just on my way home," he said, his voice trembling. "I didn't do anything wrong." The police didn't believe him. They exchanged glances, smirking. "Oh, really?" one officer said, his voice mocking. "A black kid like you wandering around this neighborhood at night? Sure, nothing suspicious about that. We received a report of a suspicious person," the other officer said, his voice sarcastic. "A black guy, carrying a bag, and looking around. Sounds familiar?" They searched Ethan's bag, deliberately taking their time and being thorough, as if searching for something particularly dangerous. They emptied the bag, throwing his clothes and belongings onto the ground. "Look what we have here," one officer said, picking up a book. "A book, definitely a dangerous weapon." They burst into laughter, mocking Ethan. Ethan felt humiliated and angry, but he didn't dare say anything. He knew he had no power there. They questioned him about his name, address, and why he was walking through Oakwood Hills. They asked him insulting questions, deliberately trying to make him feel small and powerless. Ethan answered all the questions, but he remained scared. He felt like he was being treated unfairly because of his skin color. He felt like he didn't belong there. He remembered times when he had been stared at or treated differently because of his skin color. He wondered if it would ever end. Just at that moment, Mr. Brooks appeared. He was furious to see his son being treated roughly by the police. He saw the fear and humiliation in his son's eyes, and he knew that this was unacceptable. "What the hell are you doing?" he said angrily. But inside him, a fire of rage was burning. He felt like he was boiling, as if a monster were growling in his chest. "This is my son. What right do you have to search him like this?" The police turned to Mr. Brooks, a mocking smile on their faces. They looked him up and down, as if assessing him. "Well, look who we have here," one officer said sarcastically, deliberately drawing out each word. "A heroic dad coming to rescue his son. Do you know what your son did?" "He didn't do anything," Mr. Brooks said, his voice firm, but he felt his heart pounding. He tried to control his anger, but he knew he was on the verge. "You treated him like a criminal just because of his skin color." "Come on, don't give us that cliché," the other officer said, smirking, as if he were telling a joke. "We're just doing our job. We received a report about a suspicious person, and we have to check." "Suspicious?" Mr. Brooks said, his voice full of indignation. But he tried to keep his voice from trembling. "My son is on his way home from basketball practice. He didn't do anything wrong." "Oh, really?" the other officer said sarcastically, as if he were talking to a child. "Then why is he wandering around this neighborhood at night? Surely there's something shady going on." They burst out laughing, mocking Mr. Brooks. Mr. Brooks felt insulted, as if they were trampling on his self-esteem. He felt like he was being pushed to his limit, but he knew he couldn't lose control. "I'm warning you," he said sternly, trying to suppress the simmering anger. "You're violating my son's civil rights. I won't let this go." "Oh, really?" one officer said mockingly, as if he were making a meaningless threat. "What are you going to do? Call a lawyer?" "I don't need a lawyer," Mr. Brooks said coldly, as if he were making a declaration. "I'm an FBI agent." The police fell silent, the smiles vanishing from their faces. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with worry, cold sweat trickling down their backs. They knew they had made a grave mistake, an irreparable one. They had crossed a line, and they feared they would pay a heavy price. "An FBI agent?" one officer said, his voice trembling, as if he were uttering something unbelievable. Mr. Brooks pulled out his FBI identification and showed it to them. The police looked at the ID, and they realized that Mr. Brooks wasn't kidding. They saw his name, his title, and the FBI seal. They knew they had made a huge mistake, not just with an ordinary citizen, but with someone in power. We're sorry, sir," one officer stammered, as if trying to offer an insincere apology. "We didn't know." "You didn't know?" Mr. Brooks said, his voice cold, as if he were making an accusation. "You didn't know that you have no right to treat my son like this? You didn't know that you were breaking the law?" The police were silent. They didn't know what to say. They knew they were wrong, and they feared they would pay for their actions. They knew they had insulted an FBI agent, and they feared they would lose their jobs, or even go to jail. Mr. Brooks said nothing more. He just looked at them, his eyes cold and full of disappointment. He felt a surge of indignation, not only for the unfair treatment of his son, but also for the blatant abuse of power by those who were supposed to uphold justice. He knew that their apologies were meaningless. They were just afraid for themselves. "I won't report this to your superiors," he said, his voice resolute, as if he were passing sentence. "I'll settle this right here." Mr. Brooks pulled out his phone and made a call. "I need 2 police officers arrested immediately," he said, his voice cold, emotionless. "They violated my son's civil rights and engaged in racial profiling." Just a few minutes later, 2 other police cars arrived, their lights flashing, sirens echoing through the neighborhood. The officers got out of the cars and approached the 2 officers standing next to Mr. Brooks. They looked at each other, a silent understanding. "You are under arrest for violating civil rights and racial profiling," one officer said, his voice stern, as if reading an indictment. The 2 officers were handcuffed, the cold metal snapping shut like a sentence. They looked at Mr. Brooks, their eyes filled with resentment and despair. They felt like their world was collapsing, as if they were falling into an abyss. "You'll pay for this," one officer said, his voice venomous, but inside him, a deep fear was gnawing. Mr. Brooks said nothing. He just looked at them, his eyes cold and unwavering. He knew he had done the right thing, not just for his son, but for all those who could become victims of injustice. He knew that sometimes, justice needed to be served swiftly and decisively. A few days after the incident, Laura Cartwright decided to visit Mr. Brooks's house. She felt ashamed and remorseful for her actions. When she knocked on the door, Mr. Brooks opened it and looked at her with suspicion. I know who you are, he said. What do you want? I came to apologize, she said, her voice trembling. I was wrong. I let fear and prejudice control my actions. I'm so sorry for what happened. Mr. Brooks was silent for a moment. Then he said, I hope you've learned a lesson from this. Racism doesn't just hurt the victims. It hurts the whole society. I understand, she said. I promise to change. I'll try to be a better person. Mr. Brooks nodded. Then he invited her into the house. They sat down and talked for a while. Mr. Brooks told her about the difficulties that people of color face in society. She listened attentively, and she felt more ashamed than ever. When she left, she felt lighter. She knew she had done the right thing. She also knew that she still had a lot to do to make amends. Racial prejudice led Laura to suspect Ethan, resulting in a wrongful action that caused him harm. The police abused their power, demeaning others based solely on their skin color. Mr. Brooks bravely stood up for his son, exposing injustice and racial discrimination. The immediate consequences faced by the two police officers served as a stark warning to those harboring racist and abusive tendencies. This story is a profound reminder of the importance of building a just society where everyone is treated equally, regardless of skin color or status. If one day you face a situation like the one in this story, how will you act? Will you remain silent in the face of injustice? Or will you bravely stand up for what's right? If this story has made you reflect on racial discrimination and abuse of power, please like and share to spread this message to more people. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. We may not be able to change the past, but we can choose how we will act in the future to build a more just and equal society. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.